All right. Okay, and we are live, and this is Mac McCullough from Willard Library, bringing you stories at sundown, live from Burley Corners in the northern part of Penfield Township. And my guest this evening is Rob Ridgeway. Rob is the superintendent at Harper Creek Schools. One of my colleagues, when she found out that Rob was going to be on the show, I guess a good old double R, and she said it affectionately. By the way.
All right.
So it must be a nickname.
Yeah, but, maybe a high school friend, huh?
Could be. Rob, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's a really nice night. It's been a nice week for weather, huh? I've been outside more the last 4 or 5 days than I have, the last 2 months, I think.
Yeah. I actually went out and, I'm not a great golfer or anything, but I went out with a friend, hit 300 balls at the driving range. So I'm a little bit sore.
But you got some sore hands after doing all that.
Yeah. So anyway, Rob, really welcome you on the show. You're one of a few that have actually reached out to me and say, "Hey, I'd like to come on." So I really appreciate that. It makes me feel like I have a fan base or something.
Right. Well, I watched your show when you were outside. I thought that was really cool, by the campfire, I think. And maybe started out there, and I keep hearing other people that come on. So I thought, hey, I might as well come on and see if I can share some stories also.
Yeah, that's so cool. So there's a few things we want to talk about, or I want to talk about, ask you about. But one of the things I thought, in my experience, it's more the exception than it is the rule that a local school district superintendent is from the community originally. And it's not unheard of, obviously. And I think in smaller communities, maybe that's more common. But I'm just wondering, tell me about how you got into this. And I think you mentioned before that it was kind of like a family thing. How you got on the track to be here, and a whole bunch of questions. And do you think it helps you to be, familiar with the community like you are?
Yeah. So the teaching part, that was just something I have a passion for. So I consider myself a teacher, and I don't look at it as, I'm an administrator or a superintendent. I look at it as I teach people. And so I got into teaching, right out of college. So I went to Athens High School, and I actually lived, interestingly enough, closer to Harper Creek than I did to Athens. Mm-hmm. So I just lived a few miles outside of where the mall is, outside of that area of town.
Yeah.
And then I went to Albion College and tried to play football, and was much better at math than football. So I ended up, continuing on, got my degree in math and teaching, of course. And then started teaching, and my dad's a math teacher. My grandfather was a teacher, and he actually moved up to a superintendent as well, which is kind of interesting. I remember when I told my grandmother that I was thinking about becoming a superintendent, he said, your grandpa said that you shouldn't do that. That's not the best in the world. And I said, well, I think I'm going to do it anyway. So the rest is kind of history. I've been doing the superintendent job for about 14 years now. Taught for 13, taught math, and I really enjoyed that. Enjoyed the relationships that were built with kids. And it was kind of different because back then it was more, everything was in the classroom, and everything was about the relationships with the kids and how they were doing. And then when I became an administrator, it just was totally different because now you're working with adults and trying to help them. And if I'm going to be frank, it's much easier working with the kids sometimes because they're a little more pliable in understanding and trying new things. And now another aspect, my son, Tyler, he's a 4th generation teacher. He's teaching over in Jackson. And so we have 4 generations of teachers in the family, and it's kind of, I guess, in the blood.
Yeah.
In terms of the community thing and being close by, there are some advantages. I know, from before, I know a lot of people, and I know kind of how the systems all work together. It's unusual having 4 public schools in one city. Yeah. And growing up in that, you kind of understand that. People coming from the outside, sometimes they struggle with that understanding.
Yeah. When you started this job, we had the paper, which I used to work at, and we had an interview, and you said 2 things about yourself. That 1, you wanted to be seen, and 2, that you were going to listen. I see you at Rotary, or I used to see you at Rotary, and I see you out and about. and just talk a little bit about how that informs what you do. And
Mhm.
and that kind of leads up to the current climate that we're in right now. But yeah, be seen and listen. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I think it's critically important to make sure that you're out with your community and that people see you, and when they see you and you're at events, then they can have those casual conversations. I mean, we can survey people and we can ask them, their thoughts in informal ways, but the best way to really get information is from people face to face and giving you the real scoop of what's going on, and you can ask some questions about how things are going for them. But getting out, what I tell administrators or principals that I work with, and they kind of work for me now, is I say, if they don't see you out, your teachers don't see you in the classrooms, your parents don't see you at events, they're going to make stuff up about you. And sometimes the stuff they make up isn't the friendliest. And so you want to make sure you can tell your own story. And getting out and doing that, you can tell your story. They can get to know you as a person. You're not an object. You're not the superintendent of the school, the superintendent at Harper Creek. You're just Rob, and you're someone that they can come and talk to. And yeah, I'm very fortunate. I get to be influential in what I do, and I can really shape how things work and go within our school district. But the only way that I'm going to make a real impact is if I listen to people and see what they have to say. So one of the things that I really like doing at Harper Creek that I started, or that we started to do, is I do donuts at a school building once a week, but about once a week at every building. So every building I go once a month. So weekly it's at a different building. So I'm always sitting down and kind of informally talking to, especially our staff, to see what is it that they need. And COVID caused some issues, so we had to stop donuts for a while based on orders that we had. But we really tried hard to do things like this, virtual type meetings with people to get input, but as well as to have them hear information. And like I said, and if they don't hear from you, they're more than likely going to make things up. And a lot of times, the stories just get skewed. It's kind of like the what do they call that game where you tell somebody something and somebody else tells somebody something, and eventually it just gets all messed up.
Yeah.
You might as well tell your own story.
Yeah. Well, and that sounds like it makes perfect sense, and it does make perfect sense. But I would say again that it's a little bit unusual, and I'd say that in a good way, because it's a pressure-packed job that you have. It's one of the hardest jobs, and I would say the same thing for teachers. But when you're in administration, you really do. You could easily not be all that visible to your faculty, to your staff, or the community. So you have to work at it.
Yeah. I would agree. We do work hard at it, and COVID has caused me specifically not to get out of the office as much as I would like. And so sometimes I'll go to a teacher's classroom and I'll have they won't have kids in their room, they're in their planning period. I'll talk to them a little deeper about what's going on and what we can do to help them. But it just doesn't seem like I get out enough. But I know the staff, they continue to say they really appreciate even this kind of communication virtually, even if it's not face to face all the time.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced anything like what we're going through with the pandemic in your career? Anything even remotely like this?
Yeah, I don't think anything close to this. We had some really tough budget times when the housing market crashed back in 2000. I think it was 2009 or so when it started. And so those 3 years were really hard. But they were harder because we were really trying hard to keep people's jobs, keep people employed, making sure that we can offer everything we could for students. But this is just so much different because it's affected everybody. You had said a few minutes ago that the teachers are working so hard, and I would say teachers have never worked as hard, to try to navigate this really difficult situation. And then I go further, the principals, the paraprofessionals, the food service workers, bus drivers, they're working harder too. I mean, they all have to do extra things that they've never done. And so I just appreciate so much all of the extra effort that's gone in by everybody to make this year happen for kids. I mean, it may not, and I would say that parents would probably argue, the kids are falling behind and they're struggling. But what we are able to offer, I think, has been advantageous. Getting kids back to school, some has been helpful. I'd like to have them back to school more, but every little bit that we can do is help them get through this pandemic.
And there's my colleague right there, calling you Double R. So that's where it came from. Doing a fantastic job. How about that?
Oh, I appreciate that.
Um,
I do
and
appreciate that.
well, one of the things that I thought of, your teachers, when they're offering distance learning and in-home, in-class learning, right? They're doing both, but it's not the same approach, is it? I mean, how do you
Yeah.
how do you adjust those approaches for those two different groups?
Yeah,
Right?
it's totally different, and I think I've said it a few times. I think we've learned about 5 years worth of how to teach using technology in 1 year, or actually less than a year. We're coming up on the anniversary when we found out from the governor, I think on March 12th of last year. So,
Yeah.
but we've learned so much, and there's a lot of things that we want to continue. But in terms of teachers in the classroom and doing both, it's really tough because right now we have teachers that are in-person teachers, we have teachers that are virtual only teachers, but we also have kids that are quarantined all the time, and so they are responsible for those kids as well, and they're totally different ways to teach. And so I think what many teachers are doing is a flipped classroom approach. They're doing a lot of the reading, a lot of the things that you would probably do in class, doing at home, and then when they're in class, they're really using that time, and this is middle school, high school specifically, they're using that time so that they can teach and gain understanding, to do well, and then giving them work to work on at home on those other virtual days. So it is really tough. It's a lot of extra work. It's, instead of having, let's say a teacher had 4 or 5 preps, now they got 8 to 10 preps because you're teaching the in class and the kids that are home at the same time.
Yeah,
it is very, very difficult, but they've navigated it. We've learned a ton, and I think that we've gotten really good at virtual instruction, especially the teachers that are doing all virtual. So we have some teachers at the school, I can't put a number on it in my head, probably 15 or so that are completely virtual. That's all they do all day long. And so they've learned a lot of lessons. Like, you do really short bursts in person, and then the kids work on something, and then they come back and do another short burst, and then do some more things. They do lots of videos, creating videos, and then having those for kids and their parents. That's another thing that we found out. Parents are the ones helping, and they need help. They need help on how to teach the math and the science specifically. Most people, they don't say, well, I can't read very well, but a lot of people say I can't do math very well. Yeah. And so that makes it really challenging when everybody in the family is at home frustrated. And so these folks, the teachers, are trying to come up with videos and teaching parents how to teach their kids math, science, those a little bit more difficult subjects to do at home.
Yeah. One of the things that the pandemic has taught us, that for those of us who even think we're technically pretty savvy, we found out how much we don't know, right? And so my question was really about how you've been able to support families. And you mentioned the other day, I can't remember how much you spend a month on hotspots, for example, but supporting families, whether they have broadband access or not. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, that has been one of the toughest things. So when the pandemic first started and the kids were home learning, we had basically 2 choices. We had kids that had broadband access and kids that did not. And so we created paper packets for all the kids that didn't. And so the first week, I'm trying to remember back exactly, the first week we did it, we created somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 or maybe 400 paper packets. That's about how many kids didn't have access. And then by the time we got to the end of the spring, we were down to, I believe it was 50. And the way we did that was through hotspots. Basically called up, one of the local vendors and said, we need 100, 200 hotspots, and we need them next week. And they came through, and it took a little bit of time for us to understand how those work, how to do the tech support for people at home to get them to work, because we really couldn't go to their house. And so, and it wouldn't, before the hotspot worked, the virtual computer didn't work. So you're trying to do it on the phone, all kinds of different things. But that was really the biggest thing. And, we're spending a lot of money every month on hotspots, but I think it's just one of those things that is necessary for kids to have an equal playing field. But I still hear from parents where the hotspot isn't as reliable, just like your cell phone. Sometimes you get really good service, and sometimes for no reason at all, you just lose service and you lose the call. Yeah. So that's, those are some of the challenges that have been out there. Lots and lots of surveying. And that's something that, like I said, I didn't do a lot of surveying because I like to do face-to-face conversations, but we have surveyed our parents and our community on what their needs are and what they need. And more than likely, we haven't met all the needs, but we are trying really hard to make sure that kids have that access on a daily basis.
I wanted to ask you, and you already mentioned a little bit about how much you've learned just doing the virtual, working through that virtual learning, distance learning, whatever we call that. What have you learned? I mean, this has been like a crash course in a whole lot of stuff. Do you see yourself coming out of this better? Do you see yourself coming out of this more effective across the board in your district?
Yeah, there's definitely things that have been advantageous with doing virtual. So one of those is I wouldn't call it a classroom thing, but it's our meeting with parents. So I don't want to say it was a fight to get parents to come in, because a lot of parents are very good and they were accommodating. But if I'm a parent, I'm working, and you want me to come to a meeting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I have to take time off work. I've got to figure out how to make that happen. I've got to drive back. Well, now we can do a virtual meeting from their desk and do the same exact 10 or 15-minute meeting, and nobody has to really be out. And then that transferred into parent-teacher conferences, and it transferred into our special education students who have many meetings about their individualized education plans. Things like that have been really good. Also using, we use Google Classroom within our school district, and so it's not perfect, and I don't want to say it's perfect, but it's a way that teachers can catalog all of their assignments or all of the work that they've done, not just assignments, but any, let's say, articles that they've read or videos they've watched in class. They can archive all of that. And me as a student, now I can go back into the Google Classroom and look up everything that we've done that entire semester, basically. And so it's just a really nice way. And then the kids' assignments are turned in that way as well. So there's a record of every assignment that they've turned in. And so on both ends of it, it's a really good way to do that. And then with Google, you can have, and I'm not an expert, but I'm going to try to play one here. Google Docs, you can work together with several people at one time. And so we can do collaboration, group work where kids aren't sitting next to each other, but they are working on assignments together, because we know that collaboration among our staff and collaboration among our students is the best way to learn. We want to be organization of learners, all the way from top to bottom. And for us to learn, we've got to work together. And within the COVID parameters, it's really hard to have a group sitting together in a classroom and doing the work. But that same group of kids can be on Google Docs and be working together pretty seamlessly. So that's been a real advantage, I think. And I do believe that there's going to be families that are going to decide to stay virtual, and they're going to probably stay virtual their entire schooling. And we have to keep up with that, and we have to make sure their needs are met. We've gotten a lot better about communication with our parents. That's maybe the number one thing that's gotten better, is the individual teacher in the classroom talking to the individual parent and them having that communication. A lot of times there was stigma of, the parent not communicating, not feeling like they can communicate with the teacher on a regular basis. And then there was also, the teacher's really busy, and how do you make time for that? I think they've learned, that they can, work together with kids much easier than they ever.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, being able to tailor your approach for the different needs of different kids. I mean, it sounds like that's exactly where you're going with that, and you've learned lessons, right?
Yeah. Technology is not going to replace the face-to-face teaching. It just won't. I know that Dr. Michael Rice, the superintendent of schools in Michigan, he had said that. But technology can enhance. It can really enhance what's going on. So let's say I am a student that I'm behind in a certain aspect. We can use technology to hone in on that skill, that specific skill. If it's math or reading, social studies, science, it doesn't matter what the subject is, and say, okay, you're behind on this, and we're going to hone in on that and have you do a bunch of things using technology to help you. Now, it's not a replacement for that for the teacher. It's not a replacement for the paras, but it was very helpful for parents, because at home they're struggling because they're working with a child who's having a tough time. They get upset. Maybe they break down, and I think all of us have been in that point with your kids, because you want to help them and you feel helpless in that situation. And now we have, like I said before, videos or even other pieces of technology that can come in to really help out, so that frustration isn't there as much.
Yeah. And you brought up another point that I'm always curious about. I mean, for a lot of kids, especially, not everybody has a great home life, right? Or there's a lot of challenges at home, and school is more than just friends, and it's more than sports, and it's more than class. It's that teacher you have a relationship with that lifts you up, or it's access to a meal, a hot meal. How have you been able to navigate those needs during this? And
That really is, I would say that's probably the toughest part is kids that are in bad situations at home. We want to protect kids as mandatory reporters and things like that. We can see signs at school when kids come to school, but if we don't see them, they don't come to school. They're virtual. That makes it really tough. Sure. And the way we've overcame that is by having. When I say we, our teachers really do the work. I don't do that work, but they have that. They build a relationship with kids, and they can kind of look for things that they need help with. If it's food security, if it's their housing, if they can tell that things aren't looking good. I mean, maybe the kids have got coats on, it's cold, and then we refer those kids to our social workers and to we have behavioral specialists at all our schools, and then we connect them to what they need. Now in the spring, we were delivering food to lots of satellite spots with our buses. We were actually taking food to homes, just doing everything we could do to make sure that kids had that food security. And now that kids are coming to school, about 70% of our kids, so we can take care of them, but we are also still offering, those food services. And one partner I want to make sure I mention, Love Thy Neighbor, is done a great job. They're a food pantry in our area. And Fred Lutsky runs that, and he's just outstanding. And they had been providing about 300 weekend food bags for kids for many years. And then during the pandemic, they just stepped it up, and they just said, "How many do you want?" And they provided whatever number we gave them. So in the spring, we were providing about 700 meals on a daily basis to kids and families. I shouldn't say that to kids, because you can't feed families, but we just give the kids food to the kids.
Yeah.
And who knows who eats it at home? But that was a really good deal, and of course they've continued on, and so have we. Our food service department, the kitchen staff, they've just done an outstanding job. They've worked tirelessly. They provide food on all of our breaks, so they didn't get spring break, they didn't get Christmas break. They were providing food the entire time. So I really appreciate the help that they've done as well.
Yeah. You mentioned Fred. Fred won a George Award for creating that pantry a number of years ago. Does an amazing job. I also wanted to ask you about how. I mean, this is a tough job. It's a tough job in the best of circumstances, and this has been really tough. How you're coping, but also how you're making sure, how you're helping your faculty or your staff, do the self-care and make sure that they're in good shape. Because that's really important if you're working with kids, is that you're in good shape, right?
Right. It is very important. And I feel like my job is to support the people who work in our school, just whatever they need to be successful. And, sometimes you feel like you're falling down a little bit in tough times like this, just because taking care of people, you can tell that they're hurting, or they have struggles at home, and they're struggling themselves. And so what I try to do is, one thing that we really did is we tried to lift people up and recognize the work that they've done. And my assistant at school, Sharon Zebel, had came up with an idea, and her and I talked, and we had something called this Heart for People Awards, and our communication director actually helped a lot with that as well. And what that is we basically had our staff nominate each other for nice things that they've done for other people. Whatever that happened to be, there's no criteria, just nominate. So every week during January and February, I would get on a call on Wednesdays, or a Zoom, whatever you want to call this, a meeting, and I would read out everybody who was nominated. And typically it was 50, 40, 50, 60 people. Or last week we had 120 that were nominated. And then we gave out some awards. The Harper Creek Optimist Club helped us out financially, so we gave out a few things. But in general, it was all about just recognition people for the hard work. And I think that's one of those things that people want, is not that they want a pat on the back, but just to say, we appreciate the job that you've done. And I know that I see on Facebook, I see our parents talking about that a lot, but I think that's really important, that people feel appreciated. That goes probably longer than anything else. It's funny because I always tell people, take care of yourself. And they're like, yeah, I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm doing all this video stuff at home and I'm learning something new. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. You're telling me to take care of yourself. And so we just said, okay, let's do it different. And let's actually do things that are going to help, and having times in which our staff can get together, and it not being a business meeting has been really successful also. When they can see each other, they can laugh a little bit. Right before winter break, we did our all school raffle. Because we had used to do that when school started, a really fun event. Lots of vendors around town would donate things, and we would just do an all school raffle when we start school off. It's a nice, team builder. So we didn't do it, and all of a sudden we said, okay, we need to do this, and we did it right before winter break, and it's probably one of the most fun things. So I dressed up like Santa and Mr. Greenman. Probably know Ed Greenman. He's a longtime Battle Creek guy. Yeah. He was there helping me out, and we just had a really good time, laughed a lot, and I think that those kind of things went a long ways. The other pieces is just being out, talking to people, and listening to things that they need, and then trying to provide those. And like I said, sometimes I probably have fallen down on helping everybody, making sure they have what they need. But hopefully, through this, that we can say that we all, came together and really accomplished this school year. When we get to June, 7th. We're gonna
I'll bet. This is a really good segue, because I always ask folks what they're reading, and you shared with me a few things. It really focuses on, I guess, on organizational excellence, and there's a couple of books, but I'll let you start and pick the one that you're most thinking about right now.
Well, my staff would tell me that Joy Inc. is all I ever talk about, but the book that really led to all that was The Advantage by Lencioni. And what that book was about, it really was how we can make our leadership team, be the best it possibly can. And one of my friends here in Battle Creek, you may know Chad Kiger. Chad's a business. Yeah. He had said, "Hey, Rob, I think this is a really good book." I don't know if you know Chad very well, but he's a reader. I mean, he reads like crazy. And he said, "I think this would be really, really helpful for you and your leadership team." And so I read it, and we made a bunch of changes about how big a leadership team should be and who should be in it and how you do that. But really what it came down to is we had to start off and think about, what is our why? Why do we exist as an organization? What do we do? And obviously we're a school, we teach kids. And so I wrote this down, so I'm going to actually read it. I pulled my notes out. This is from 2 years ago. So we took one full year. We read this book. It took one full year at doing all this work, and it came down to like three little things. But the first thing we said is that we are going to change the world by inspiring curiosity and the love of learning. And so everybody thinks right away, oh, you're talking about students. You want curiosity and a love of learning of students, but that's not really true. We want that of everyone, the students, the staff, and our community. We want kids, and we know, I guess if everybody knows this or not, if you've had kids, when they're young, they're always asking questions. They're really curious. They love to learn. And for some reason, when we go through school, kids like to learn less and less and less as they get older. And we were really curious and said, why is that? What can we do differently? How can we keep the curiosity and the love of learning longer and further? So we dug a little deeper. And the next question we really asked was, what do we do as a school district? So we started off of the why and then the what part. And we said, okay, and it took a long time for us to get this little sentence, but we did. We create a nurturing environment that cultivates inspired students and staff. So we really want to cultivate what learning is, and we have to do things to make it an environment where staff wants to learn, an environment where students want to learn. So you got to get the environment right. Then from there we say, what's it going to look like when we succeed, and what are those core things that have to happen? And we had a board that was just full of different words. I mean, things like curiosity, serving, community. We wanted listeners. We want people to be reflective and have integrity. But we boiled it down and said, okay, here's the three things that we are at the core of our being. And the first one was joy. And it's not joy in the sense of happiness. Like we're happy to walk into work with a smile and we say hi to our neighbors and our friends, our colleagues and the kids. It's that feeling you get when you accomplish a goal, and specifically when you accomplish a goal together. The biggest example I always do is if you, let's say you had a running club where people were running and they do like 5Ks. Well, I'm just getting started. I start running. I run my first 5K. When I finish that 5K, I'm not happy. I'm actually tired. I'm probably not feeling great, but the inside feeling of joy that you get when you accomplish that goal, that's what we want when our teachers and our kids come to school. We want them to say, what does that joy look like? And we asked our staff, what gives you joy when you're at work? And the things that came in when a student learns something new for the first time, or maybe a really hard concept pops on, the light bulb goes off, that's a joy moment for that staff member. Or if they have a really tough kid, maybe with a tough home life, and they get a relationship with that student, those are all kinds of things that really bring joy. The next one is heart for people, and I already talked about that a little bit with our raffle, but it really means we want to care about others, but we also want to assume positive intent. We noticed, and I think I mentioned this earlier, that sometimes the teaching profession isn't quite as highly thought of as it once was. Yeah. And so we want our parents, we want other people to have positive intent. So if something happens at school and your child comes home and says, hey, the teacher said this to me, and the parent gets really upset, and sometimes they call me. And so my first instinct is always to say, now remember, I think that this teacher really has the best interest in mind of your child, and maybe they didn't mean it that way, or they didn't realize what they said, or maybe you're just interpreting it a little bit different. So assuming positive intent is really important when you have a heart for people, and of course caring for others is really important. And most teachers, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, people that work in the kitchen, and our principals and our secretaries, they already have a big heart. For the most part in our business, everybody's got a pretty big heart. So that's really not hard to get to, but it's that positive intent, because we do like to, as a human race, we like to blame other people. We like to, maybe even talk about people behind their backs a little bit. But if we have a heart for people, we don't do those types of things. Yeah. And then the last one is, the fancy word is efficacy, but belief in self is what I say, a strong belief in self. We want our staff to start with to have the belief in themselves, that they can be successful, they can do anything that they want to do, and that they're very good at what they do. And that will build belief in our kids and themselves, because I want our kids, whatever their skill is, every single child has a skill, and we have to find it and then cultivate it. And so we need to help them understand what that belief in self is. Not every child is going to be good in math, right, but there are kids that are, and we want to cultivate that. Not the child that may not be good in math, they might be an excellent at building stuff. And if we don't cultivate that skill, then we're not doing everything that we could possibly do.
Yeah. Well, that second one you mentioned, heart for people.
Heart for people. Yeah.
Heart for people.
What's that?
Well, who was the author? Do you remember?
Oh, there wasn't a book for Heart for People. That was, we just came up with that stuff.
Oh, I get you.
And so the Joy, this Joy Inc. book that I was talking about. I got my books here too. You can't have them. Joy Inc. is really cool because it's a business in Ann Arbor. I think it's called Menlo. I guess I just looked to see what it was, Menlo. But they decided to build a business. It's a tech industry. They make software. But they just simply decided to have a business where it felt really good to work. And they said, what are those things that make it that way? Well, first of all, they said collaboration. You have to collaborate together. And so one of the things that they do is everybody works in teams always in their business. And then to start every day, the teams get in a circle. I think there's about 100 or so employees. They get in a circle and they talk about for like 30 seconds what they're doing and what they might need help with other people in the organization. And so I've really tried to instill that with our administration team. We do it once a week where we have we used to have a circle where we passed an object around and everybody kind of talked, and we've continued that for the last couple of years. But it's that feeling that you have where you're working together accomplishing that goal. And I really learned a lot of lessons as to how we could do that at school. Collaboration was a big one because teachers typically work in their classroom by themselves. They're individualistic people for the most part, and we have to sometimes force the fact that we need to have people working together. And I'm not going to say that they don't want to or don't like to, but it's just the nature of the beast. They're typically by themselves with kids. And so we bring them together to do work together, and we can accomplish great things that way.
Yeah. Of the 3 books you told me about that I hadn't read, that was the one that I picked up and started. And it's, it's been really intriguing. One of the things 2 things, you're talking about joy and happiness, happiness is your mood. Joy is your climate, right? That was one takeaway that I came with. Yeah. And then the other thing that was kind of interesting, and I'm curious if this has been your experience, is as the author was talking about, creating these new ways of working together, and even doing it as an experiment where it was wildly successful, he still found people resisting making those changes,
right?
And doing that kind of, messy, collaborative, close work. Has that been, change is hard for everybody, right? We learn to do things the way we do them.
Yeah, we definitely find that, because teaching as a profession had been individually in your classroom doing your own thing. And then when Harper Creek's lucky because they have several people that teach the same subject. Where I came from originally, I was the only math teacher that taught the classes I taught. I didn't really have anybody to talk to, but they have people they can bounce ideas off of, and then we can find what those best ideas are. And I'm not going to say our teachers are resistant, like 100%, but it's just one of those things of there's a little bit of competition with evaluations, so we test kids, and then my classroom had this many, and your classroom had this score, and we just are trying to get past that idea that it's not my kids and your kids, it's our kids. And all the kids at Wilds Park Elementary are everybody's, and everybody basically gets the same evaluation score for their testing. Same at Beetle Lake, and same at Sonoma, same in the middle school, and same in the high school. And there was some resistance to that because some people said, well, wait a second. So I'm going to get somebody else's score of kids I've never even taught in that school because there's so many kids. And we said, well, everybody's in it together. And so we have to share the scores together. And that has been a pretty big shift. But the collaborative work, there was a few times where, people said, hey, what if on this professional development day, we just go to our own room so it's quiet and we can get some work done? And we said no a few times. And no, you have to work in the big room, in the library. You all have to work together. And what I witnessed when I walk in, and I know some people, it was too loud for their comfort. Yeah. But when I walked in, I saw people that were laughing. I saw people who were working with tables right behind them. So if I'm the English table and there's the math table, they were working back and forth. A lot of stuff got done that probably wouldn't have happened with 4 people in a classroom hovered over a table. Yeah, it just felt different. And that's what I read in the Menlo book, is that they said when you walk in, it's just a bunch of activity. And some people didn't think they liked that, but eventually they got used to it and actually were more productive. And I think that's going to happen. COVID put a big wrench in that. Sure. Because now we're trying to do it like this. It's a little bit trickier.
Yeah. Well, I'm enjoying the book, so thank you for the recommendation. So I have one more question for you. We've talked a lot about, and it's not all been doom and gloom. You've shared a lot of good moments, but it's been challenging. I'm wondering what the most uplifting moment of the past year has been for you, or the most uplifting experience that you can think of.
All right, I'm gonna have to think a little bit. There's been a few things along the way that were really cool. Our graduation ceremony this year, we had to wait, and we did it in July. I think July 25th was the day. Yeah. And how the parents felt because their kids were recognized in a time when they never thought they would. I thought that was a really, really nice event. I was really moved by the Hartford people nominations and all the nice things that people had to say about each other and all the great work that was happening. I'm trying to think. Like you said, it's definitely not been doom and gloom. Oh, okay, here's one. Sonoma Elementary, we had 9 staff members quarantined right before winter break out of 30. Wow. And we operated the school for a week with 9 less people. Wow. So the principal basically sent out a message and said, hey, this situation came up and we were short a lot of people, and let's, if you want to meet in the morning, we're going to try to, figure out how we're going to get through these next few days. And she said, every single staff member showed up an hour before work and
Wow.
just made it happen. So it was really cool.
Wow. That's a great one to leave it on.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm so glad you came on the show tonight.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I was hoping I could keep up with everybody else's readings, but you know.
You did great. You did great. And sticking with the theme, next week is my colleague Tanisha Dungy, who is a lifelong educator and now head of children's services at Willard Library. So looking forward to that. So
cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great night.
All right, you too. Good night, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I told you not to leave, and I left.
That's all right.
So, thanks a lot. It was a great interview. Good job.
I hope that went okay.
It went great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a good evening.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.